Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming to my talk, and especially thank you to the conference organizers for putting all of this together. It is so refreshing to be able to do some philosophy, given everything that's been going on in our worlds, really. Now, the title for today is a sort of tribute to Philippa Foot, her famous, well-known article, Morality as a System of Hypothetical Imperatives. The relevance will become clear as we progress. I'll do three things today. One, go over Loudon's normative naturalism. Two, go over an argument from Kelly that seeks to undermine normative naturalism. And then a repurposed reply from Philippa Foot, a reply to Kelly. My main interest for today is whether Kelly's argument is any good. Not necessarily to defend the normative naturalist, though I do end up doing that. My main reason is whether Kelly gives us a good reason to abandon normative naturalism. The project in the back of my mind is sort of addressing the problem that categorical norms tend to, or historically have been thought to challenge naturalists, specifically from a metaphysical and epistemic point of view. Now, what is normative naturalism? On Loudon's view, we should construe epistemic rules hypothetically or instrumentally. The thought is that what one should do will depend on what one's goals and values are. Here's an example. If you want falsifiable theories, avoid ad hoc theories. Now, these rules will have conditions that make them correct. So the imperative would and should make a true claim about the relationship between the means and the ends. And you actually want the end stated in the antecedent. There's also a clarification that should be done here. Whose goals? Is it one person's, one specific individual's, each individual's, a group, a culture? That is something we won't need to decipher today. Now, Kelly actually has big problems with this view, big scruples. Kelly says, look, instrumental rationality is that rationality one displays in taking the means towards one ends. Epistemic rationality is that rationality one displays when one believes propositions strongly supported by one's evidence and refrains from believing propositions that are improbable given one's evidence. And on normative naturalism, epistemic rationality is just a species of instrumental rationality. But Kelly won't buy this. He says, what a person has reason to believe does not seem to depend on the content of his or her goals in the way that we would expect if the instrumentalist conception were correct. And here's the form of the argument he gives. It says that P is evidence for Q. That is, we constantly think and act as though epistemic reasons are categorical, is evidence for epistemic reasons being categorical. And it's this specific argument that I will target today and criticize. So before we do that, though, Kelly gives us a way to criticize it. And a way to criticize of any argument of this kind would be as follows. You show that P is true, or P would be true even if Q is not true. So here's an example. Abby is sneezing is evidence for Abby has COVID. Now, how might you object? You can say, well, no, she sneezes all the time. Maybe it's July and she has allergies around this time. So she would sneeze, you say, even if she didn't have COVID. In other words, D, even if not C. So let's go back, and how can we apply this to our case? Here's one strategy that Kelly gives us. I'm labeling it the ubiquitous goal strategy. And it's the thought that there is some goal so common that we readily assume it in discourse, so common that it becomes redundant to express it. So consider an example. When you're driving and you're about to crash, somebody just says, watch out. They don't say, watch out if you want to live, because that would just be redundant and seems odd. But that doesn't mean that their imperative, watch out, is just hanging there without any goals. And so maybe there's something similar is going on in our epistemic discourse. There's just some goal. However, Kelly says, this is going to run into a dilemma, and we're going to have to reject one of these two theses. So if you appeal to this common goal strategy, you have to deny the idiosyncrasy of goals, and it's the thought that everyone just has different epistemic goals. There's no one goal that we all share. Well, at least that's the thought. Now, you might then affirm the idiosyncrasy of goals and say, okay, everyone does have different goals, but then you have to deny, as an instrumentalist, the intersubjectivity of the epistemic reasons. Given a set of evidence, epistemic reasons apply equally and uniformly across for the given population. Now, why does the instrumentalist have to deny this? Well, because the instrumentalist believes that what your reasons are depend on what your goals, and they believe that the goals vary from person to person, so therefore the reasons should vary from person to person, which also seems odd. Hence the dilemma that Kelly confronts the normative naturalist with, the instrumentalist. Now there's a bit of dialectic back and forth there, so I went ahead and put this into a little chart just to summarize it all at once in our minds. So on the left will be the claim and then a potential reply. So Kelly starts off with saying that our treating epistemic reasons as categorical is evidence that they are categorical. One potential reply is this ubiquitous goal strategy. Now if you do that, you're going to go ahead and end up denying the idiosyncrasy of goals. Alternatively, if you affirm the idiosyncrasy of goals as an instrumentalist, as a normative naturalist, then you must deny the intersubjectivity of epistemic reasons. And so the dilemma for the normative naturalist. All right, so now in part 3, I'll go ahead and develop this repurposed reply from Foote. She follows Kant, like most of us, in characterizing imperatives into two kinds. The hypothetical, where a ought depends on one's desires, goals, ends, and so forth. And the categorical, where the ought does not depend on one's desire, goals, ends, and so forth. And she says, our practices reveal hypothetical imperatives. The example I can think of is diet and exercise. Your fitness gym person will tell you how to exercise given a set of goals that you have. And if you don't have those goals, then he or she will take back the advice. Now, do our practices reveal the categorical imperative? Do we take away, do we issue should statements with independently of any desired goals or ends? And it seems like we do, at least in the moral domain. Just because you don't care anything about what morality requires doesn't mean I stop telling you what you should do from a moral point of view. But Foote tells us we do this. We act exactly the same. In the etiquette case, in the case of etiquette in club rules, we tell people what they should do from the point of view of etiquette, regardless of what their goals are. Here's a quote: "Although people give as their reason for doing something the fact that it is required by etiquette, we do not take this consideration as in itself giving us a reason to act." Now, what I want to point out here is that there's a sort of structural similarity between what's going on here in Foote's article and what we saw in Kelly's article. We might put her interlocutor as having given this argument. We constantly treat moral reasons categorically, and that's evidence for moral reasons being categorical reasons. And Foote's reply is to say, what? We treat club rules and etiquette rules non-hypothetically. That means we don't retract our should and ought statements just because we found out the person doesn't have goals that are fulfilled by them. Yet nevertheless, the implication is it'd be weird to call those categorical. So here's how I'm going to cash out Foote's argument. Absent any demarcation criteria between moral claims on the one side and club and etiquette rules on the other side, we have 3 options if we want to advance the argument. Option 1 is we can say, oh, it turns out that etiquette and club rules are also categorical, like moral rules are. We can go the other way. Morality is, after all, hypothetical, just like club rules are. Or we can just give up on the original argument. Now, given that presumably the interlocutor that we're imagining does not want to say that moral rules are hypothetical or that etiquette and club rules are categorical, the most attractive option is option 3. Now, I think we can apply this just straightforwardly into Kelly's argument. There's just too much structural similarity. We don't need to deny the two theses that Kelly points out in order to rebut Kelly. All we need to do is to show, like Foote did, that the demarcation criteria are missing. So for Kelly, given that the demarcation criteria are missing, he has three options. Say that etiquette and club rules are categorical, which I don't think he'll want to say. Say that epistemology is hypothetical, which is, again, not what he wants to say. Or give up on the original argument, which ends up being the more attractive position. Now, Foote, in her paper, develops this sort of response to a rejoinder that I'm calling the rebuttal from reluctance. And Steph thought that we're reluctant to treat morality and epistemology. One reason that might be the same as etiquette, and one reason that might be is that we sense a difference. Foote's reply goes basically to be confused, and that's why I have a sort of a and that's her reply in large part. I do share the confusion, and it's interesting to see how good of a reply this is, but I won't use that confusion as a reply. What I will say as a way of reply is that just becomes a new argument, an argument from our sensing the difference. What I was interested in and what Kelly's argument is an argument from our practices, our treating certain reasons in a certain way as a conclusion that they are categorical. So my conclusion for today is two-part. One, Kelly's argument is undermined by repurposing Foote's argument. And two, absent any demarcation criteria between practices and etiquette and other normative fields, I don't see how an argument from our practices of the kind Kelly gives can succeed.